Welcome to Everyday Ethics. I'm your host, Michael Liebowitz, here all by my lonesome once again, but I think we'll be fine, and Persephone will be back tomorrow. Please remember that we enjoy our super chats and super stickers, especially poor folk like me. I'm trying to think of a topic for today, and I was struggling a little bit to come up with one, but I think I want to do some stuff on thinking in terms of principle, the principles of ethics, why principles are important. So first, I want to, before I get to that, and this will probably be a multiple day sort of thing. And by the way, feel free to ask any questions that you may have. I'd be happy to answer them. So the question was posed to me a couple of times. Hey, Daniel, how are you? Hi, Katrin. David Friedman is the first one who mentioned this to me in debate in relation to egoism. He said, well, what about the prudent predator? And he talked about that. What if it's in somebody's interest to commit robberies, to pull off a heist? In other words, I mean, ultimately, what it boils down to is the ring of Gyges, scenario where there's no way you're going to get caught ever, and so it's in your interest, supposedly, to pull off the heist that's going to set you for life. So, first of all, very, very importantly, is that this is not an argument against egoism. It's not an argument against human life as the standard of morality. Let me explain why. Let's suppose that we start off with human life is the standard of morality, right? All that tells you is that life is the standard of value and human life is the standard of morality. We judge what is ethical, we judge what is of value by what is good for the human beings, the man, qua man, but specifically as it applies to an individual person. So, now, Ayn Rand has developed an entire system that she says stems from this, that, through induction, she's discovered the principles that are in a person's interest. But even if you can say, well, but it's in a person's interest to, commit this theft, let's say, all you've demonstrated then is that that theft would be ethical at that point. What I find the people who bring this example up, David Friedman, Michael Huemer, for instance, is it's an attempt to smuggle in a conclusion and therefore invalidate a theory based on your conclusion. This is what I mean. They take it for granted that theft is wrong with no proof, no argument, nothing. In Michael Huemer's case, it's an intuition. And David Friedman, too, I believe, is an ethical intuitionist. So the intuition they have is that stealing is wrong. Therefore, if your theory leads to a conclusion that stealing is okay, your theory must be wrong. But that has it exactly backwards, right? You don't start with a conclusion and then go back and see what theory leads to that conclusion. You start with premises, you start with observation, you start with the evidence of the senses, and then you follow the chain of reasoning, of inductive reasoning, towards a conclusion. So even if we were to prove, yes, it absolutely is in your interest, which I don't believe it is, to do this stealing, that doesn't invalidate egoism. It doesn't invalidate life as the standard, human life as the standard of morality. So let's start with that. Now, the problem I'm having with this is I don't know how far back in the chain of reasoning I need to go in order to demonstrate this. I mean, human beings, our cognitive apparatus is such, we have a volitional conceptual consciousness, meaning that we have to choose to use our minds, and our minds are conceptual. We store information in terms of concepts. So, for instance, if I have a concept of light, I know that it applies to the ring light that's behind my computer on me. I know that it applies to the ceiling light behind me. I know that it applies to the sunlight that I was just outside. I conceptualize light and I abstract all the irrelevant factors away so that I understand what light is. That, in essence, is what a principle is. We abstract the noise, we abstract different qualities away, and we hold on to the fundamental involved. So, for instance, whether I steal $5,000, $500, $10 million, or whether I steal it from my cousin, my mother, my aunt, my brother, my friend, whether I break into a house to do it, or I take it off the table, or I take it off a pinball machine at the bowling alley, the fundamental is I'm taking property that doesn't belong to me without consent. That's theft. So you identified the principle of theft. So human beings think in terms of principles. Now, the fact of the matter is, human beings, we have, say, a lifespan of 75 years, right? The average, 75, maybe it's up to 79 by now. I don't know. We have to think and plan long range, and we do so by means of concepts, principles, right? So I understand that there's things that I can do today that undercut my best interest 10, 15, 20 years down the line. I have to plan long term. The thing that allows me to do that is principles. For instance, I could understand that, let me use a really simple example. Rat poison is bad for me, right? Rat poison is bad for me. Rat poison is bad for me whether you put it in my coffee, you put it in my tea, you put it in my cake, my cheeseburger, my hamburger, my liquor, or I just drink it straight. Rat poison is going to be bad for me. So I know avoid rat poison. Now, there's an abundance of things like that in life. For instance, take a street, for instance. You know that you drive on public streets. I'm not going to try to get places by driving on people's lawns. I'm not going to drive through a forest that has no road. I'm not going to try to drive through water. I understand that I have to drive through a street. I also understand by means of principles things like potholes, ditches, things that I need to avoid. So that helps me to navigate life. Now, there's a lot of principles. I don't want to go through every single one possible. Suffice it to say that human beings live by principles. We need principles in order to plan our long-range actions, in order to act in our own best interest. That's what we do. So now, take Ayn Rand's principles that she says are in our interest. She says rationality is the fundamental virtue, the fundamental principle that we're supposed to live by. Rationality means commitment to reason, to the exercise of our rational faculty, learning by logic, integrating material provided by the senses, all five of them, and following the evidence wherever it leads. We need a rational epistemology, right? We follow reason always. Reason is an absolute. There are no cases in which it is in our interest to not use reason, right? That's fundamental. So she also says we need to live by the principles of productivity, right? We need to produce. In order to survive long range, we have to produce the values that our life and self-interest requires, or those that we can trade with other people. Productivity, right? We've gone through these before, but quickly we'll go through again. Honesty, recognition of reality, no attempt to fake reality. Don't attempt to gain values by dishonesty, because we don't want to put ourselves at war with that which is. Right? We want to recognize reality, what it is. Integrity, loyalty to rational principles, right? We don't want to be in a situation where we're picking and choosing, because we negate the entire reason we have principles if we look for examples on a daily basis on how we can get away with skirting principles. Right? I can get away from this principle, or I can get away from that principle. And we try to calculate every single day and every single action when it would be okay to violate a principle. Remember that human beings, principles and concepts condense a lot of information, right? And that allows us to understand a vast array of things. Now, if every day and every action, like I'm going for a walk just now, okay, is it okay for me to run in front of the car this time? Is it okay for me, or, would it be comfortable to wear, I don't know, whatever, a sweater on a 90-degree day? I understand the principle of sweater. I understand the principle of 90 degrees. I don't mix the two, right? We don't want to be in that situation where we're changing things every day I'm trying to think, and every action I take, how to get away with this or how to get away with that. I'm applying the principle. So you want to be loyal to the rational principles. Hold on one second. That's the yelling at the dog principle, dogs principle. So we want to be loyal to these rational principles and not seek to violate them to get away with them. So you've got, so far we got productivity, honesty, and integrity. Justice, the principle of giving people that which they deserve. We understand that human behavior, by and large, rewarded behaviors are repeated, punished behaviors are deterred, right? Are not continued. So if we want to encourage people to behave well, especially towards us, we want to reward that, give them what they've earned. And if we want to deter them, we want to punish them for the bad actions, right? That's simple justice. I mean, there's more to it, but that's the basic. That's the basic justice. Now you got independence, right? I have to think for myself. Jim Valiant cannot do my thinking for me. I need to understand how to think logically, how to draw conclusions, and I have to know how to act on those conclusions, and I have to act on those conclusions. I cannot depend. Remember, the principles help us plan long term. I cannot depend long term over the course of my life on somebody else taking care of me, on somebody else serving me, providing me with my food, with my clothing, with my shelter. I need to be able to think, and I need to be able to act, and I need to be able to get those things that I need for myself. Finally, we have pride. Pride is the commitment to moral perfection. Why? Similar to integrity, we want to always be moral. We want to always practice rationality. We don't want to deviate from that. So we need a commitment to constantly practicing these things. Now, in my view, when you want to validate a given viewpoint of whatever it is, I consider it there's horizontal and vertical justification. This is a metaphor that I use, and what I mean is this: so vertically, any view that we have, we want to be able to trace it back to the ground, back to reality, back to the concretes, right? So if that viewpoint, whatever it is, conflicts with reality, conflicts with ultimately the data of the senses, we know the viewpoint's wrong. So we need to tie it back. Now, we also have an additional check on concepts, right? On our ideas, we check it against the other ideas that we have. Because if that idea, remember, contradictions can't exist, so we connect them to the other concepts. If it contradicts one of those other concepts, we know we've made an error somewhere, and we need to correct it. Now, in terms of the principles that we are going to act on, that we want to use to plan long range, acting in our self-interest, we take those principles and we tie them to reality, to the data of the senses. Are these principles actually in our own interest? What are the examples? What are the justifications that demonstrate that these things are universally in a person's best interest, right? We do that. Also, we tie them to the other principles. For instance, does productivity violate justice? Does justice violate independence? And we see that they're all consistent. They're all interlocking, right? So now but we also know that if a given action violates any of those principles, then the given action is not in our long-term interest because we've identified the principles that are. Now we're confronted. The idea comes up. Okay, well, what about in this given situation where you're guaranteed to get away with this? First of all, there's no such guarantee ever in life. So also, imagine if you approached every situation like that and you had to go through all the calculations to decide whether a given instance is in your best interest. You don't have the time, you don't have the ability to do that in every situation. That's why you're relying on principles. So it never actually comes up, should I engage in this one action that's going to benefit me? Maybe this theft is going to benefit me long term. We know that that action conflicts with all the other virtues, right? It's not independent, it's not honest, it's not just. It's certainly not productive. It's not integrity, and it's not pride, right? So we know that. Now, the only way we could absolutely determine that specific action is against our interest or for us, in absence of principle, is to go through everything every day and go through all these calculations, which is the exact reason we need principles, so that we don't have to do that. So you never actually get to the point, if you're living a principled life, where you have to go through all these steps to determine if this specific action is in your interest. So now you look at, for instance, the initiation of force. You're using force. Right off the bat, we know if you initiate force against somebody, you're not being just. You're not giving that person what that person deserves, right? Are you being independent? Well, are you initiating force to take something from that person? Well, then you're certainly not being independent. Again, if you're doing it to try to steal something, to rely on something to benefit yourself long term, you're certainly not being productive there. You're not having integrity. You're not having pride, right? So you're violating the other principles. And then you could also look, I'm putting myself at long-term risk. This person could harm me in return. Maybe his friends, family, they may come back and get retribution. There's a whole lot of reasons not to do it. So you don't think of each situation anew. You're living by principle. You're governing your existence by principle, so you don't approach each situation and try to go through all the various calculations, cost-benefit analysis. Now, hypothetically, if somebody were to ask me, quite frankly, well, if you were 100% guaranteed to get away with something and it was going to benefit your long-term best interest for the rest of your life, how could you say it was unethical? Okay, here's a big problem. There are no guarantees, as Akira Felix says. That's the first thing, right? The ethics that I live by are an ethics for living in the actual world, in the actual situations that I am going to be dealing with. It's not for a hypothetical world where I'm wearing the ring of Gyges and nobody can see me and nobody knows what I does. That world doesn't exist. So why am I going to spend my time on this example where I could be the prudent predator, as David Friedman says, and I could live happily ever after off of my ill-begotten gains, right? But okay, for the sake of argument, just for the sake of a hypothetical, is it possible that there could be a scenario that I could get away with it, that it would benefit me long term? I'm not a rationalist. I'm not going to rule that out. What I will rule out, that it's ever in my interest to engage in that, to step out of my principles and approach each situation new, to do those kinds of cost-benefit analyses. I'm confident in saying that, and I'm also confident in saying there's no guarantee anyways that I would get away with this activity. And Leonard Peikoff, by the way, in Objectivism, the Philosophy of Ayn Rand, goes through this whole chain that's very, very, edifying. Because he talks about how, imagine this one heist you get. Okay, now you've got all this money. But that's not just going to be one lie. You're not going to tell your friends and family about it, because then you're really taking a risk of getting caught. So now you have to lie to them. Where'd you get the money? What about your bank? What about the people imagine you go move? What about the new people? Who are you going to tell them who you are, where you got the money, what you did to get it? I mean, there's just a whole lot of things that are lie begets lies, begets lies, begets lies. That's what actually occurs when you try to lie, when you try to commit a crime to get away with something. Those are the practical effects of it. We know this by principle. Can we guarantee in every single circumstance that could possibly come to you it would never benefit you? No, I can't do that. No more than I can guarantee that living productively, honestly, and independently is going to promote, is going to guarantee you a long, prosperous life. There's no guarantees. What we're doing is maximizing our chance for success, understanding what human life requires, and it requires living in principle. So that's what we are doing. Now, a quick divergence in the case of emergencies. Because, somebody may say, and somebody did actually say to me, well, you're carving out the exception in emergencies. Why are emergencies special? Okay, let me define what I mean by emergency. An emergency is a temporary situation where I'm at extreme risk of extreme bodily harm or death, right? It's a temporary situation where I face those things. So now let's give a couple hypotheticals on what I would do in these situations and why they differ from the other situations that we're talking about, your normal everyday thing. One is in the situation where I'm going to be stealing, I'm attempting to go get values from somebody else that aren't mine to improve my life, supposedly, right? I'm going to improve my life. In the case of the emergency, I'm protecting my life, right? There's a big difference. In the case of the money, I can choose to go and make money honestly. I can come up with different plans. I can do things to benefit myself. In this case, I'm going to die unless I do something. So suppose that I am on the famous lifeboat, right? Akira and I are on a lifeboat. The lifeboat is going to sink if both of us stay on it. Akira and I fight to the death, and I throw him off into the ocean, right? There was no other alternative. One of us is going to die, or both of us is going to die. I would say that ethics don't properly apply there. It's like the morality ends where the gun begins. It's such an extreme emergency, and it's also so unlikely to ever take place, that judging my moral behavior based on what I would do in that situation is ridiculous, right? And also, in most cases, so suppose it's not a life and death situation. Suppose it's a situation where I find myself stranded in the woods and I come across the abandoned cabin. I have no food. There's animals that could be getting to me and harmful to me. I need shelter. I need food. I need water. That cabin has that stuff in there. There's nobody around. I cannot ask the owner. I cannot call them. I cannot speak to them. Would I be immoral to break the window? No. I'm going to break the window. I'm going to go in. And in that situation, I can then make recompense to the person. I can pay the person back afterwards. Once the emergency is over, I get back to my normal way of living. Even on the lifeboat, once the emergency is over, I can get back to my normal way of life, my normal ethical living. Akira can't, unfortunately, but we were in a situation where it was him or me. I mean, that's an extreme emergency. That's a very different scenario than saying to me, well, you can go and steal this $1 million and go live high off the hog for the rest of your life for 10 million, 50 million, whatever. Very, 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 very different scenarios. So, folks, by the way, no crime, criminals, and corrections today. I've got too much to do today. I'm overwhelmed with stuff to do, and I've got to get it done, so I can't do it, but I will do it tomorrow. I'll make up today's episode tomorrow, and hopefully Persephone will be back tomorrow. Jason Adams says, one thing that is important to property rights in a capitalist society would be a definition of what a legitimate emergency might be and have that written into the deed so you'd know that when you buy land, house, when an emergency vehicles could come on the land. Yeah, good. That's a possibility. AC Sansone 55 says, gives me $5. First of all, let's put it right up there. $5. Thank you so much, sir, for the super chat. He says, I rarely get the chance to watch these live, but wanted to stop by to thank you for the wisdom. Also, please never stop doing interviews with Jim. I think it's safe to say that I will not stop doing interviews with Jim, sir. I love doing interviews with Jim. I love Jim Valiant. Let me put that out there. One of my absolute best friends in the world. Plus, you know what they say out there. They say the most dangerous place to stand is between Jim Valiant and a microphone. So, I tease. But Jim does like to talk, let's be honest. And I love to hear him talk, so it always works out. Speaking of which, Jim Valiant and I have a great episode out right now on the Rational Egoist. dealing with the virtue of productiveness, I highly recommend that people go check that out. It's very great. Rational Egoist channel. Jason Adams now with the $1.99 super sticker. Jason, thank you so much, sir. Very, very much appreciated. Very, very happy there. I can't get this. It won't come off now. Okay, there it goes. Any questions? Any other questions? Any questions about principles? I hope I've done a decent job of explaining them. I mean, it's only a 25 hour. It was a 25 minutes, diatribe that I went into to really grasp the importance of principles. You really need to understand epistemology and understand concepts, the problem of universals, as it's called, I should say. You really need to understand what concepts are, what their role is in human life. And I mean, I know I gave short shrift to that. I didn't do the best job of explaining it, only because I didn't want to turn my everyday ethics program into an entire philosophy course. So, that's my reasoning there. Any questions? Any questions? Let's see. Jason Adams says he's back from Prague. As you can see, the currency has changed. Yes, $1.99. Absolutely, Jason Adams. By the way, anybody that's joining us from X and not from YouTube, this show is Everyday Ethics. The channel that this show is on is the Rational Alternative on YouTube. We've got a lot of shows. We've got the Capitalist Corner every weekday, noon Eastern time. We've got this every weekday, 2:30 p.m. Eastern time. We've got Crime, Criminals, and Corrections, or Crime, Corrections, and Culture, as it's still called, but I've changed the name. That's on 3 times a week. We do weekend shows, and if you become a member, we've got a lot of special content for you that's, I think, very good. Mark Pellegrino of Supernatural fame and a lot of other things. He and I do video shorts. We're also going to be doing special shows just for members. That's coming up very quickly. We'll be doing that stuff. And also, by the way, you get Jim Valiant frequently stops by, and I anticipate us getting some other guests in the near future. So check us out. Good stuff. Any questions? Any questions, folks? Okay, if there are no questions, I'm going to cut out a couple minutes early just because I really have a lot to do today. My boss hit me with a lot of reports that I need to knock out, and they're all due by 5. So thank you, everybody. Thank you for the super chats, the super stickers. Thank you for your comments. Thank you for your questions. Please come back tomorrow for another discussion. I will really appreciate it. But until then, remember to always be ethical.